Evelyn Hartwell didn't expect her night to end in tragedy, but stepping into Chicago's Sapphire Lounge, she unknowingly set a chain of events into motion, one that would leave lives shattered. Evelyn Hartwell had spent the past year piecing her life back together. At just 24, she'd already faced challenges that many couldn't imagine. A struggle with prescription painkillers after a college injury had derailed her dreams of moving to Chicago. But now, sober for 12 months, she was determined to rebuild. Her job as a marketing coordinator at a tech startup wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. The studio apartment in Lincoln Park wasn't much bigger than her childhood bedroom, but the neatly organized bookshelves and handwritten goals taped to the fridge reflected the life she was working so hard to create. Yet, recovery was lonely. The nights were the hardest, and tonight was no exception. Evelyn had promised herself this outing, just one night to feel alive again. The Sapphire Lounge was everything she'd imagined: elegant, exclusive, and humming with quiet sophistication. A glittering chandelier hung over the main bar, casting reflections onto the polished floor. Evelyn adjusted the hem of her fitted black dress, her heels clicking softly as she stepped inside. Victor Stone noticed her almost immediately. Sitting at the bar with a whiskey in hand, he exuded confidence, like he belonged there. At 44, Victor had the polished ease of a man used to getting what he wanted. His tailored charcoal suit was impeccable, and his easy smile made Evelyn feel like the only person in the room. The evening unfolded like a dream. Drinks turned into shared laughter in a quiet booth, and soon Victor suggested heading to his high-rise apartment. The hesitation in Evelyn's eyes didn't last long. Victor's charm and the promise of adventure drew her in. Victor's apartment was stunning, with floor-to-ceiling windows framing a sparkling view of the Chicago River. The city buzzed quietly beneath them, its sounds muffled by the luxurious height of the building. Evelyn ran her fingers along the cool marble countertop as Victor opened a bottle of champagne, the cork's pop echoing softly in the open space. But the night was about to take a fateful turn. Laura Stone's shift had ended early. After hours in the trauma ward, her only thought was to collapse into bed. The elevator ride to the 25th floor felt endless, her scrubs damp from the long shift. She unlocked the door quietly, stepping into the dim apartment. The sound of laughter stopped her cold. Victor's laugh, warm, intimate, intertwined with a woman's voice. Laura's pulse quickened, a low buzzing building in her ears as she crept toward the master bedroom. The faintest glow spilled out from under the door, and every step felt like it carried the weight of all 17 years of their marriage. The apartment falls silent, leaving only the sound of Laura's shallow breathing in the dim hallway. Some silences speak louder than words. For Laura Stone, the stillness in her apartment felt deafening, a prelude to the storm about to erupt. The Stones' apartment was a testament to Victor's meticulous nature and taste for refinement. Every piece of furniture seemed curated, from the sleek gray sectional that anchored the living room to the glass coffee table holding an untouched issue of Architectural Digest. The soft glow from the pendant lights reflected off the polished floors, and the floor-to-ceiling windows framed a breathtaking view of the Chicago River, its dark surface rippling under the streetlights. Yet, despite the luxury, the space felt cold, like a showroom, beautiful, but devoid of warmth. For Laura, this apartment represented everything she had worked for alongside Victor: late nights at the hospital, skipped vacations, and the sacrifices of 17 years of marriage. But tonight, as she stood outside the bedroom door, all she could feel was its emptiness. A monument to a life she thought she understood, but now realized was filled with lies. Testimony excerpt. She said she noticed the champagne glasses first. It was the kind of detail that stuck with her, like the sound of laughter she wasn't a part of, recounted Detective Alan Grayson, lead investigator. Laura's fingers trembled as they hovered over the brass doorknob, every nerve in her body screaming at her to turn and leave. But she couldn't. The faint sound of a woman's laughter, light, melodic, cut through the silence, followed by Victor's voice, low and intimate. A sharp pang shot through her chest as the realization sank in. He was in there with someone else, someone younger, someone who didn't know him the way she did. The sight that met her eyes was surreal. Evelyn Hartwell, dressed in a black cocktail dress that clung to her like an unwelcome reminder of Laura's own faded youth, sat perched on the edge of the bed. Her hands gripped the hem of her dress, her expression frozen between fear and embarrassment. Victor stood by the window, his tie undone and a glass of champagne in his hand. The warm, ambient lighting made the betrayal feel oddly cinematic. For a moment, no one spoke. The stillness stretched, heavy and suffocating, until Laura's voice sliced through it like a scalpel. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, her words sharp enough to make Evelyn flinch. Victor set his glass down on the nightstand, his movements deliberate, almost rehearsed. "Laura," he began, his tone measured, as if he could talk her down with the same calm he used in board meetings. "This isn't what it looks like." Laura's laugh was bitter, almost a bark. "Not what it looks like," she echoed. "So what? She's here to help you with your taxes?" From court records, prosecutors highlighted Laura's sarcasm as evidence of her awareness and composure, at least in the initial moments. Evelyn shot to her feet, stumbling slightly as her heels caught the edge of the carpet. "I didn't know," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I swear, he didn't tell me he was married." Laura turned her gaze to Evelyn, her eyes narrowing to slits. "Get out," she said coldly, her voice carrying the weight of suppressed rage. Evelyn hesitated, her eyes darting to Victor, who stood motionless. "I said get out!" Laura shouted, her tone rising as she took a step forward. The next moments unfolded in a chaotic blur. Evelyn crouched to grab her phone, hitting a button that dialed her mother's number. The voicemail she left would later be played in court, her voice frantic, pleading, "Mom, help me, please, she's going to kill me." Laura's fury, simmering just below the surface, erupted. She lunged at Evelyn, grabbing her arm as Victor yelled, "Laura, stop!" But instead of intervening, he froze, retreating a step toward the window. His inaction would later draw sharp criticism from both investigators and the public. Evelyn managed to wrench her arm free and stumbled toward the door, her phone still clutched tightly in her hand. Behind her, Laura's gaze shifted to the bedside drawer. Inside was the handgun she kept for protection, a weapon she never thought she'd need to use. Victor's panicked shouts filled the room as Laura drew the gun. "Laura, no!" he cried, his voice cracking with fear. But the rage in her eyes was no longer contained. Years of betrayal, simmering resentment, and exhaustion reached their boiling point as she raises the gun, Victor's voice pleading in the background. "Don't do this." For a few seconds after the gunshot, silence enveloped the apartment. But the echo of that moment would ripple outward, shattering lives and exposing the secrets that led to tragedy. The gun Laura Stone used was a Glock 19, a 9mm semi-automatic handgun purchased years earlier for personal protection. Its matte black finish contrasted starkly with the light beige carpet now stained crimson in an irregular pattern around Evelyn Hartwell's lifeless body. The victim was found lying face up near the dresser, noted Detective Alan Grayson. Blood spatter on the wall behind her, and pooling beneath indicated she was shot at close range while standing or leaning back. Victor Stone, visibly shaken, had fled the bedroom immediately after the shot was fired. Security footage captured him pacing in the apartment building's lobby, his phone pressed to his ear as he made a series of frantic calls, none of them to 911. Instead, Victor later admitted, he contacted his attorney, a move that would draw sharp criticism during the investigation and trial. Excerpt from Victor Stone's first interview. I didn't know what to do," Victor stammered. "She wasn't herself. I thought if I tried to stop her, she might turn the gun on me. Or herself. I didn't want to escalate things." Investigators noted Victor's disheveled appearance when he was interviewed hours later. His tie was loose, His shirt rumpled, and his hands trembled as he recounted the events. Yet, his detached demeanor, at times deflective, struck a nerve with both detectives and the public. Detective Grayson, later commentary. He kept saying it wasn't his fault, that he didn't think Laura was capable of doing something like this. But his actions, or lack thereof, spoke volumes. He had multiple opportunities to intervene, and he didn't. The crime scene inside the Stones' high-rise apartment became a labyrinth of evidence. Each detail, from the smudged champagne glasses to the voicemail left on Evelyn's phone, offered clues to the unraveling of a marriage and a life. Crime scene investigators arrived at 5:24 a.m., 7 minutes after Laura placed her 911 call. She was found sitting on the edge of the bed, the Glock 19 placed neatly on the nightstand. Laura didn't attempt to flee or deny her actions, her tone clinical when speaking to officers. Excerpt from responding officers' body cam footage. "I came home and found them together," Laura said, her voice even but distant. "I asked her to leave. She didn't, so I shot her." The room was a picture of chaos. Shattered glass littered the floor where a champagne bottle had toppled during the struggle. Evelyn's phone, still faintly glowing from the ongoing voicemail recording, lay beside a smear of blood near the dresser. The bedspread was rumpled, a single heel abandoned near the foot of the bed. Forensic analysis presented in court. The trajectory of the bullet indicates the shooter was standing approximately 18 inches from the victim, testified ballistics expert Dr. Carla Martinez. Gunpowder residue found on both the victim's clothing and the shooter's hand confirms a close-range shot. The Glock's safety mechanism had been disengaged, a point of contention in the trial. Prosecutors argued this demonstrated premeditation, as Laura would have needed to flip the safety switch before firing. Detective Grayson, press conference. "What stood out to us was the deliberate nature of her actions. The gun was stored in a locked drawer. She had to retrieve the key, unlock it, and remove the weapon. This sequence of events suggests a level of intent beyond a heat-of-the-moment reaction." Victor Stone's interviews revealed a pattern of infidelity that prosecutors used to establish motive. Under questioning, Victor admitted to having brought other women to the apartment during Laura's shifts at the hospital. However, he maintained that Evelyn's presence was a mistake. Victor Stone, court testimony. "I didn't think she'd come home early. I wasn't thinking about the consequences. I never thought it would escalate like this." Public outrage over Victor's role in the events exploded as more details emerged. While not legally culpable, many argued his deceit and inaction made him morally responsible for the tragedy. The fallout and broader implications. As Laura Stone awaited trial, the case drew national attention, sparking debates about accountability, infidelity, and the thin line between passion and premeditation. The voicemail left on Evelyn Hartwell's phone became the prosecution's most damning piece of evidence. Played multiple times during the trial, it captured her desperate pleas for help and the escalating violence in the background. Jurors visibly reacted each time the recording was played, some averting their eyes as the sound of Laura's shouts and the fatal gunshot echoed through the courtroom. Laura's defense team argued temporary insanity, citing the emotional trauma of discovering her husband's infidelity. They brought in a psychiatrist who testified about Laura's mental state at the time, describing it as an acute stress reaction that impaired her ability to think rationally. Excerpt from the defense's closing argument. Laura Stone is not a monster. She is a woman who reached her breaking point after years of betrayal. But the prosecution painted a different picture, emphasizing the calculated steps Laura took to retrieve and use the gun. They leaned heavily on forensic evidence, the voicemail, and Laura's 911 call, which they argued lacked true remorse. Prosecution's closing argument. This was not a moment of blind rage. This was a deliberate act, a choice to end a life. The jury deliberated for 4 days before delivering their verdict, guilty of second-degree murder. Laura was sentenced to 25 years in prison, eligible for parole after 15. Victor's life unraveled in the aftermath. Fired from his accounting firm, he became a pariah, both professionally and socially. Evelyn's family sued him in civil court, ultimately settling for an undisclosed amount. Public opinion continued to condemn his role in the events, with many calling for harsher accountability for those who create the circumstances leading to such tragedies. For Evelyn Hartwell's family, the verdict brought some measure of justice. But the scars left by that fateful night, on them, on Laura, and even on Victor, are a reminder of the destructive power of betrayal and unchecked emotions. In the end, the only thing left untouched in that high-rise apartment was the view of the Chicago River, silently reflecting the city's chaos.